time, so I think we'll start. Welcome everybody to the Imagine If Festival and to this incredible session that's been organized by HundrED. I have to say that HundrED has a particularly special part in my heart because I was involved in HundrED in the very early days as the editor-in-chief. My job originally was to interview 100 education thought leaders from around the world for what they thought was the future of education had in store, which was just incredible. But to see what HundrED's gone on to do, the community that it's built and the work that it's doing on a daily basis just completely takes my breath away. So speaking selfishly, it's incredibly special to be here today. And the lineup that we have is just wonderful. I will let Crystal from HundrED give a bit more information on that when she speaks, but I just wanted to set the stage a little bit, which is I should say my name is Kate Robinson. I'm the co-founder of the Imagine If Festival. I'm also the co-founder of a book, here it is, called Imagine If, Creating a Future for Us All, which I co-founded with myself and my father, Sir Ken Robinson. And in it, my dad makes the case for these 8 core competencies that he feels should be woven through education from the very first day of school right the way through to graduation. And they are curiosity, creativity, criticism, communication, collaboration, compassion, composure, and citizenship. So when I got in touch with HundrED to see if they would like to do something today, what I thought could be very exciting was if we could talk a little bit about the 8 core competencies and also learn about what some of the innovators are doing from around the world. So without further ado, I will pass on over to HundrED and thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you for the invitation to come here. Thank you for carrying on your father's legacy in this event and bringing us together to talk. My name is Crystal Green, and I'm the head of research at HundrED. And before we get started, I just want to invite everyone here. We've made this a webinar format, so you can please go ahead and write your comments or questions in the chat at any time. And at the end, we'll have some time to revisit those and answer your questions if you have some. So at HundrED, we work to identify education innovations around the world that have distinguished themselves in terms of the impact and their ability to be implemented well at scale. So over the past year, we've been thinking a lot about 2 topics that are core in education that have really become the center since everyone was sent home because of the pandemic. And those are social emotional learning and parental engagement. So in 2021, we released 2 spotlight projects, one with the Lego Foundation on social emotional learning, and one with our partners at Parents as Allies about parental engagement. And I'm very happy to have here today 2 innovators whose work was highlighted in these spotlight projects. We have Pax Dettoni from the Innovation in Their Shoes in Spain, which was selected for our spotlight on social emotional learning, and Priyanka Handaram, whose innovation Learn to Play in Botswana was selected for the spotlight on parental engagement. So welcome to you both, and I'll hand it over to Pax now to say a little bit about In Their Shoes and your innovation.
Well, thank you very much, Crystal. Thank you very much, Kate. And Imagine If to be having this space to talk, and HundrED, of course, for pushing also social emotional learning, but also innovations around the world. And thank you to all of you that you are today here sharing with us a little bit of what we are doing and how we can imagine all together a better world. So what we are doing, well, my name is Pax Dettoni. I'm the founder and the director of Theater of Awareness, which is an organization that we have. We do theater as a way to go into social emotional learning. We use the theater and we use the masks. So I will be rightly introducing you a little bit, so that's easy to understand what we do. What we do, it's theater to understand what's going on inside ourselves and inside the others, so we can coexist, so we can learn from each other and live together. No? So at the end of the day, we are working for peace building. We use social emotional learning, we use theater, and we make it all together for coexistence. Within Their Shoes, which is the innovation that has been chosen by HundrED, we take this into schools and we work with a whole community. We work with families, with teachers, and with the students, of course. It's a way also to prevent bullying, to prevent violence. We have reached at the moment more than 70 schools in Spain, more than 1,000 people, including adults and children. And all of them, as I was just a little mid-moment telling Priyanka just before we starting, all of them, they use theater. So here is happiness, here is fear, here is sadness, and here is anger. All of them, they are inside us, but they are not us. And that's the point. When we understand that emotions are not us, we can really open our heart and open our eyes to a compassion, excuse me, my English right now, a compassive look. I am saying it right, from compassion. It's a look that will help us to see the other from our hearts and understanding more. So empathy is in the core of what we do. Compassion, it's what we try to educate. And we use theater, we use, of course, social-emotional learning, but because without social-emotional learning, we cannot get into that very, very, very deep point of our hearts. So that's a little bit what we do. So we have time to go further in the conversation. So I'll turn out to you, Crystal. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pax. It's really beautiful. Thank you for that brief description of what you're doing. I'm so excited to hear more. But now we'll turn it over to Priyanka, if you can share a little bit about what the work you're doing in Botswana.
Thank you so much. And wow, Pax, I was just so inspired listening to you. I was nodding the whole time, and I was thinking about how we can bring this into the work that we do. But just I want to echo your sentiments first to say thank you so much to both HundrED and the Imagine Festival for having us here and giving us this platform to talk about issues that are really close to my heart. And I just want to share with Kate as well that I read a paper of your dad's when I was 19, and that everything that I was doing was studying English at the time, and I actually changed my career path, went into education and do the work that I do, and I hold that one paper I read in university responsible for all my life choices. So thank you so much for this opportunity. So my name is Priyanka. I'm a social entrepreneur and an author from Botswana, and I'm on a personal mission, really, after this paper, to how the world educates, protects, and cares for young children. I should add that, very importantly, beyond all my other titles, I'm a mum of 2 young children, and that inspires all the work that I do. So I'm the founder of an organization that HundrED has kind of highlighted in parental engagement called Learn to Play. And at Learn to Play, we harness the power of play to establish play groups that are high impact, focused on school readiness, but really also on mindfulness and social development that are culturally relevant. I'll do this by training mothers to go into their own communities and establish their own enterprises, which make them community-owned but also sustainable and something that every community feels that they can buy into. And I think that's really been the kind of secret sauce, I would say, to our success, is that it's always mothers leading the way, and I find that that's the way of the world. Very biased, but I think it is, especially when we're looking at young children.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. Yeah, I really love this connection. This is something that has come from me working with both of these spotlights, the connection between parental engagement and social and emotional learning. Like, we've divided these into two separate thematics, but really they're so closely intertwined, and it's really amazing. Adults are so important in social and emotional learning, especially parents also. So I'm excited to hear more about your work and how it is that you're developing that. But we'll jump now kind of into the discussion section. And we've curated this by kind of thinking about some of the 8 core competencies that Sir Ken Robinson suggests should be the focus of education. So I want to start by talking about curiosity. How are you understanding curiosity in your innovations? What does that kind of look like in your contexts? Maybe Pax, I'll start with you.
I think curiosity, of course, but just one little thing. These 8 points that Sir Robinson has found out, I find them really into the point. No, so even if curiosity, we can see it as being curious for the world. No, being normally when we think about curiosity, we think outside of us. How we use curiosity in our context is more into our inner self, to be curious of what is inside us. So, and again, is it inside us fear? Inside us there is sadness or rage. So there is a first curiosity which leads us to look inside, in this inner no, that we keep it always with us. And the second way we work with curiosity is to be curious on what is inside the other person. There we open our doors to empathy. So which is inside, which is the feeling this person that is in front of me having right now? And how should I relate with this person, taking in consideration what he or she is feeling? So this is the two ways, of course, this more open curiosity as we normally understand it.
Brilliant, yes. Priyanka, what about for you?
Yes, I work with children under 5, and I have to say that I don't think anyone epitomizes curiosity better than a 4-year-old. And any childhood teacher or parent of a 4-year-old will have to agree with all those burning why, how, what questions. And while it can be exhausting, I think the biggest gift we can give our children is indulging that curiosity and those questions, but also sometimes turning those questions around on children and asking them those what ifs and imagine if questions. So I think, that's what curiosity looks like and feels like for me on a day-to-day. But it's really hard for us to kind of capture that because it is such a strong learning process. But it's not an outcome. It's not a piece of artwork. It's not a writing, that they can do to share their weekend use. That doesn't showcase curiosity. So one of the best ways that we've got of what that actually looks like in our context is we've got Floor Books, which is an amazing tool developed by Claire Warden, and that is a way of making curiosity something quite tangible for children, but also for parents to see how powerful curiosity is in a child's learning journey, because it will be some of the work that they've done, and the teacher will then document those big why questions. So an example is last week, our children were learning a little bit about opposites. They were learning about hot and cold, and we were showing them hot chocolates and cold chocolates, and they did a cookery class. But then they were pouring them into their glasses and starting to ask questions about full and empty and weight and which one is heavier. And we didn't have scales and all of that available at the time, but we started writing those questions down in their floor books with pictures of them pouring their drinks in and saying, will this make it hotter and will this make it colder? And that demonstrated the really powerful learning that's actually mathematical learning, but you don't always realize that came from curiosity, because they were measuring, they were weighing, they were experimenting, and so much came out of that through this floor book process that made curiosity something very concrete for parents and for teachers and for the children then.
That's really brilliant. I love how you're documenting what they're doing. I think curiosity is such a fascinating, we think about it as sort of like an orientation, but it's also a process. You learn something and you become curious about the next thing and the next thing. And it's really nice how you're also like in documenting that, then you can share it also with parents and the other people in their lives. I think that's I like that. I want to get the name that you were mentioning there, so I can learn more about that for myself.
Yeah, I'll pop it into the chat, actually.
Fantastic. But I wanted to come back to what you were saying, Pax, about how this curiosity of like inside you, and then curiosity about also what the other person is feeling, because that kind of reminds me of the next C, which is compassion, and how it is that we understand one another. So if you think about kind of what you're doing in the room, what does compassion feel like for the students when they're doing in their shoes? How do you see that?
Well, as you said, Christian, for us, compassion is our work. So what we just using this curiosity, we are using theater, we are using to get into our destiny is compassion, to have this compassion look. The first thing that the students do feel in the classroom should be this compassionate, I'm sorry, because I compassionate look from their teachers. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing we work on. So that's why we focus mainly on teachers. And then, of course, the teachers will bring the program to their classrooms, but not, one teacher that has not been working in their own compassionate look cannot pretend to do in their shoes in a classroom and have some success, because the success of the children will be done because, first of all, the teacher is doing his effort to be compassionate. And what does this process start? Where does this process start? In himself, mm-hmm. By themselves first. So being able to recognize what they are feeling, being able to manage what they are feeling, and being able to relate with the students using another kinds of techniques, using another kind of approach. Once the student is feeling this as a modeling, they will repeat. That's one way, which is very important. Then there is the second way, which is the theater, and the students will learn to see what they feel, and they will not learn that what they feel are not themselves. So they can be feeling hunger, of course, but they can manage this hunger. They can say to their anger, no, it's me who masters right now. You know what I mean? So when I do this, I can start listening to what the other one is feeling, and I can understand what the other one is feeling, and I can go in the shoes of the other one. So their compassion starts. Compassion has a first door, which is empathy. And we cannot go into empathy when we are not able to recognize what we are feeling. And then we go to the other one. That's this both ways, no? Inner and outside of us. So this is how we work compassion, which I repeat is the core of what we do. It's our destiny. That's where we are going to. Yeah. And we want this not only in the schools, but all over the world. And I will have to say this right now, in this moment, what we are facing in Europe right now. So this is what we really would like to be working for.
Can you tell me more about this compassionate look? Is it something that you teach the adults, or is it something that you make them aware of, or how does it go?
There. You just say it. We make them aware of. And this is what we call our theater of awareness. So what we do is to make them realize it, and we see it because this is very powerful. Really, masks are really powerful. As I told you, everybody does theater in our methodology. So we can see when we're, for example, doing a theater and we see a teacher that is yelling and screaming and punish a student, and we see the rates telling the teacher, now you tell him that you cannot no longer this kind of behavior in the classrooms, and you see the teachers saying no. So you can see that you are behaving because there is this motivation. And in the other side, you can say, we'll show you, you can see the kid, which is feeling fear.
Yeah.
When you are working like this. So sorry, because I think it's going to be clear how we work. This is the teacher. You see that where you are yelling or screaming, you are not just yelling or screaming this kid, but this kid is having some feeling. And maybe his behavior or her behavior is because in that moment, she was feeling so scared that finally she preferred to be quiet and not to say anything. And I just got angry because I was not able to see what was behind her behavior. You know what I mean? So with this is what we did for the COVID. We had to because we were not able to do theater no more. So we were working with them, and we tried to do it in these ways to get it clear. So that's what we do. We make adults to be aware. Yeah. And they change, and it changed. In our last evaluation that has been done in 23 schools with the University of Utrecht in Netherlands, University of Spain, one of the universities of Spain, plus the ministry, we find out that this works. So really the teachers and the adults are able to change their look. And when they change their look, something happens. Not only in the classroom, but in the whole school. The school culture really changes.
Yeah, it's really brilliant the way because in theater, like when you're using the dolls, they're able to kind of externalize it, right? They play it on the outside of themselves, and then somehow they could see that. And that's really powerful. And I love in this kind of methodology, as I understand, like they can change it too, right? You can ask them to do something different, and they could somehow practice a different emotion, practice a different response, and that can be so empowering for students to to try it?
Exactly. What we do is we teach them how to not be under the under the oppression, let's say it this way, of your own emotions, to be free. So there we go into all the techniques of managing, which will be breathing, we will get into them probably when we talk about body. But that's what we do exactly, Crystal. And then we tell them how to do it in another way. And also not to allow blame to come. Because when we talk with families, when we work with families or with teachers, and they are aware, they blame themselves because they were not able to do it in a different way before. So we have to be very careful with this also, because some of the teachers tell us, why no one told me this when I was in the university? Why I have to be right now? Maybe I'm 40, I'm 50, or I'm 60, and I've been in the classrooms many years, and I didn't know this is another approach, no, another way. So yes, Crystal, there it is.
Priyanka, I saw you nodding here also. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective, like, how does this compassion come out, and how do you see the kind of learning around that also in your context?
Yeah, I mean, I love it so much. And again, the whole time I've been thinking about young children and applying that with young children and teachers of young children as well. Because again, compassion is such a big word. And like curiosity, where we talk about making that concrete and tangible for parents to realize the power of learning behind it. I think again with words like compassion and kindness and respect, and we always tell our children we want them to be these things, but very rarely are we able to give them these specific tools and strategies of how to be compassionate. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What does that sound like? And for young children, you've got to do that. And I love the masks and the dolls, because we're making these big abstract words really concrete for children. And as you rightly said, in an abstracted way. So it's not about them now. You're not saying you need to be all of this. We're talking about the doll. We're talking about putting the mask on and acting that way, role playing. And children love role play. They'll play doctor, they'll play pet, they'll play, mommy and baby. And so being able to then harness that love for role play to use it for social and emotional development is a really powerful tool. And I think, I really like questions like, what does it look like and what does it feel like in your context? Because that's how we have to teach it to young children. And I think, you've got that again with the word empathy of that first door. I love that. I think, for young children, compassion is empathy in action, right? There's no other way for a 4-year-old to express it. It is it's a verb, it's an action word for them. And then to teach that, you have to model it. You've got to show them what compassion might look like, sound like, and feel like. What do we say when we're being compassionate? What do we do when we're being compassionate? And not just to other people, to ourselves. What does self-compassion look like? And that your blame, thinking about yourself in a different way. I think this is a really important point that often gets neglected in the conversations of empathy and compassion, but that's really important for young children. And I'll say this again as a mom, where my daughter will often beat herself up about lots of little things. She's a perfectionist. And that self-compassion is so important. And I think role play, like, what would you say? I often ask, what would you say to your best friend in this situation? And she knows really well how to be kind and considerate to her best friend. But when I say, so why aren't you saying that to yourself? She doesn't have the words to say it to herself. And we've got to practice it. And the only way to practice it is to make it a conscious teaching point and not wait for a terrible situation to happen and then teach it, but actually do it as a preventative. So it's just part of what you do on a day-to-day. It's something you do in circle time or at playtime or even at snack time. How are you making this an action and a verb and something that is part of what you do all the time?
Yeah, Priyanka, I want to go off this a little bit more and talk about the C that is communication. And I wanted to ask you, kind of going up, you're talking about how empathy is an action, compassion is an action. How are the ways that you use your body to learn with the students? What are the kind of exercises or activities that you're doing with especially with young kids, to like have them use their body in a way to learn the social and emotional competencies?
So I think, again, with young children, it's impossible to not involve the whole body, but that's also the power of play. And I think I just read a research article last week about academic programs in the early years versus play-based. And so for me, play is just, I think it's become so second nature that I forget how actually it's still quite a new concept. And so when I think, oh, of course we use our bodies, actually, maybe it's not so obvious for everybody. But, you know, if I say to you as an adult, if you're sad or upset or stressed or tired, just really, really tired, what do you do to make sure that you can concentrate better, that you are still able to come to work and get on with your colleagues and you know, process the rest of the day? But also, if you're really excited, so you've had some really amazing news and you're really eager and you're really enthusiastic, and so now you can't concentrate at work because you're thinking about this super exciting thing, how do you calm yourself down? And on almost, you know, the answer to almost all of those questions, you'd be surprised, is listen to music, go on a run, exercise, do some meditation, have a hot drink, have a cold drink, eat some ice cream. It's all sensory and it's all very physical. So it's using our bodies and our senses in different ways. So of course, children need to do that. They need to develop their sensory toolkit that we as adults have had our whole lives to develop, to know which of those wakes us up, which of those calms us down, which of those helps us to concentrate, which of those helps us to you know, kind of de-stress or kind of switch off. And so if we're not using children's whole bodies in the classroom, how are they able to communicate their needs? How would they be able to figure out through trial and error this sensory toolkit of theirs to help them figure out what is working for me in different contexts and different situations, when I've just come back from the playground and I've won my soccer match and I'm feeling so excited, but also when somebody has really hurt my feelings and I'm really sad, or I didn't have a good night last night because I had bad dreams and so I'm exhausted today at school. And it's going to be a different solution for each of them, but it usually is very physical to do with their whole bodies. And I think we also need to give them the language to talk about it. So if a child can learn how to say Tyrannosaurus Rex, they can definitely learn how to say big feeling words. And so we need to, you know, just accept that and use that, harness that power of communication in our teaching time and give them the words to have the vocabulary to express themselves differently at different times.
Brilliant. Yeah, actually, that was one of the kind of the findings that came out of our social and emotional learning report, is that the innovations are doing both of this, like giving the students a language to talk about their emotions, and then also the practices of practicing self-regulation and practicing decision making, and but we need both of those things, just like you said, at the same time. How about for you, Pax? You've already talked a little bit about this, but how are your students using their bodies? What does that look like? What kind of exercises are they doing?
Well, yes, as both of you said, and Priyanka, I totally agree with you, what you say right now, and this way of looking at it. For us, emotion, which is what we are trying to teach, how to manage emotions, how to identify the emotions, how to recognize emotions in the other ones, has, if we talk about the doors, has two doors. Has the body door and has the thought door. So language, as you were saying, Priyanka, comes to the thought. And then we have the body. So because we cannot get to the emotion like that, we cannot face the emotion by itself. So we need the body and we need our mind to reach it. So we work both aspects. As Priyanka said, everything is a matter of action. Empathy is an action. Violence is an action. Everything is an action. So the body is who does the action. Even if there is this invisible world that's behind the body that we don't see, but with the theater of awareness, we make it visible, but it does exist. So the body is the only thing that we have. So when we know that we are under an emotional kidnapping, an emotion is kidnapping us, we know it because our body, the breath, the muscles, everything. So the body, it's telling us. It's what we have to be curious, telling the curiosity before. We have to be curious of what's happening in our body. This is one thing we teach not only the students, I repeat, also the adults, because here the adults are not yet in the other side of the river. They are maybe in the same side of these students right now. So the body, it's a way where we check and we know what we are feeling. Afterwards, once we identify we are feeling a strong emotion, we can use our body as, for example, I will say a technique that we use with children, that we say the technique of the tree. So we have to convert ourselves in a tree. And how we do that? Breathing. While we inhale, we become a big tree with we can imagine apples, red apples. And when we go, the air that goes down, all those red apples will fall down. And we do it 3 times. So this is the way that students, I'm just explaining you a little very physical technique, that will learn that when there is an emotion that it's telling them, for example, hit him. What do I have to do? Breathe. I can do it by doing the tree, or I can do it imagining that I'm becoming a tree, but I just will be breathing, you know. And of course, as Priyanka said, to play. We use the body to play theater, to do dynamics. No, but this is the point, to understand that in the body we have to be mastering, because at the end our actions that we should be mastered, and to master our actions we have to master our emotions, we have to master our thoughts, and we have to master our body. So more or less, this is how we work with other things. And another thing, what we also do is, and I share it because we have it, I'm sorry, at the moment only in Spanish. We have all this shared in our webpage for free. You can download all the posters that Becoming a Tree, all the posters we use, and we put in all the schools, so the children will all the time remember what they have been working in their shoes. So it can be, of course, we are very grateful to share it with all the people that will be interested of having this kind of techniques all in the walls.
That's wonderful. Fantastic. Yeah, I want to download those now also. And there are millions of students that could use it. Just
yeah, they are all in Spanish. So sorry, but that's not the point at the moment.
Yes. That's fantastic. I want to ask a kind of a final question, and then we'll move to the question and answer section. But the last one is about the sea of citizenship. So how is the work in your settings, like setting your students up for success in their lives as citizens in society? And if you have some kind of specific story, we would love to hear that. I'll just open it up to whoever thinks of something first.
Well, I'm going to jump in also because I wanted to kind of carry on from what Pax was saying about the breathing techniques, and say that I really do find that mindfulness and yoga and breathing, even for young children as young as 2, 3, and 4, it's such a powerful tool because it helps them see the connection between their brain, body, and breath. And it can be done quite playfully, where it's also then a joyful process. And then we've used the same mindful play curriculum in a refugee camp, and then seen how it can work as a healing process as well. So I love what you're saying about the tree, and we do things like rainbow breathing, and it has to be quite concrete. We can breathe and meditate without necessarily, focusing it on something quite tangible. But for children, you've got to help them, and it's part of the theater. They're pretending they're a tree. They're imagining it's exactly like what we're here to discuss today. We'll do imagine you're a rainbow and see yourself as each color, and then you can take that further. And I'm thinking about the masks and link each color to an emotion as you're breathing it in and breathing it out. And I think there's just something really empowering where children, I've written it down, the emotional kidnapping, where, there's something really empowering where you can feel like you're no longer kidnapped by your emotions, and actually through your breath or through some exercise, through using your body, you can control your mind, your brain, rather than letting that control you. And if you said, what about teachers who are 40, 50, 60 and they're learning this now? How amazing would it be? And I'm jumping ahead of it, but imagine if every child was taught that from the age of 3. You wouldn't need to be putting you out of a job, Pax, but you wouldn't need to be doing that for teachers in their 40s or parents in their 30s and 40s, because they're doing it right from the get-go. And I just think that's something so beautiful and something we need to harness a lot more. And actually, I'm going back to that article that I read when I was 19 of Sir Ken Robinson's, where this is exactly the question he posed: is what if we just prioritize happiness and creativity in schools instead of everything else? Wouldn't the rest just come along quite naturally? And I really do believe it does. And then that, I think that will bring me to, the question now about citizenship is, because we're doing that, we're starting to see the transformation. Because we're doing it from the age of 2, 3, and 4, when children are getting to primary school especially, we're starting to see that transformation in how they're showing up at primary school. We're starting to see that they're more confident. They're able to sit and pay attention for longer. They're, they're not as socially anxious even after 2 years of the pandemic. And we've got really wonderful testimonials from parents, especially, I think, who, when we start talking about social and emotional learning and mindfulness, that we train the parents alongside it so that they can help their children at home, saying these are the tools we're giving your children. It would be great if you're reinforcing them in the home environment. But not only are they reinforcing it for their children, they're doing it with their children. And that's bringing that healing and awareness of their own emotions to them. And the biggest transformation I'd say that I think we've seen is in behavior management approaches, and the empathy and compassion understanding that parents have now built for their children, and just understanding development. Like, it's, my child is 4, they're not necessarily able to 100% self-regulate all the time. So rather than punishing them for it, how can we work through that together? And sometimes that working through is a breathing exercise or a yoga stretch or a walk outside together. It's one of those sensory toolkits, and we're starting to see that enhancing, that a dramatic improvement of parent-child relationships, because there's that understanding of each other, what's expected of them, Botswana has unfortunately culturally quite a high instance of corporal punishment in schools and physical punishment in the home. So we're actually starting to see this transformation where that's no longer the case, through play and through mindfulness and through supporting parents to support their children better, and the parents now feeling like, sure, I know it's wrong to beat my child, but nobody's ever told me what to do instead. So now that you have, I can do it. It's not like I think from us, the biggest thing is the parents saying, we know it's wrong, but we've done it anyway because we've never known what to do instead. So we've kind of felt helpless, and now we know how to help our child and ourselves through these situations. And I think that's the biggest citizenship outcome we're seeing.
Brilliant. Yeah. We're running a little bit short on time here, and I want to make sure we have time for questions from the audience. So I'll pass it over to Khadija, if you can give a question.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Such a great conversation, and the chat has been active, lots of interesting comments. So we have one question from Solomon Imamov, who is kind of along the same vein that Priyanka was talking about parents. So they've asked, nowadays, parents are busy with their career and work, and many of them prioritize their mobile phone over giving enough attention to their kids. What sorts of motivations exist for them to engage with the kids more? And anyone who wants to pick that up?
I can just say something. Love. At the end of the day, parents love their children. And as Priyanka said, now they are doing what they can with the resources they do have. And sometimes they are into their own cell phones because they are having some other inner things to look at. So when they know how to do it, how to take care of themselves, they can take care properly for their children. Because what we can see, we work with many families, is that all of them love their children. And even if they punish or do physical punish, as you say, Priyanka, we have that point also, physical punishment to their children, which we say no, and we say no even to yelling, not to screaming. When they know that there is another way, love comes, and love can really transform the world. And this is not just a beautiful sentence, it's really true.
Thanks so much, Pax. And maybe I'll go to the next question here from Simona Stangchu. How can these competencies be applied in an adult ESL classroom?
Well, I'm going to just jump in and say that my whole focus is play, and I don't think that we're ever too old to play. So if there are ways that you can bring playfulness into the adult ESL classroom, I think even I will say that was also my first job out of university, was I taught English as a foreign language in London, and to adults who are coming in, to study and work in London. And there are definitely ways to bring role play, theatre, all of that as a the most powerful way to learn a language for sure, because you're practicing it in real context, and make it real, you know, give them real life situations that they are going to encounter, but make it playful. And I think with play, what you allow for is you drop the fear of failure. You're more confident to try and make mistakes. And I think that's a really important point when you're learning a new language, because usually what holds us back is not the lack of knowledge, it's the lack of confidence. So if there's a way that you can bring that confidence through play and games into the classroom, and it's not an assessment, I think that's a really great tool to use in the adult, especially a language learning classroom.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. Yes, I'm learning a new language, and definitely play is the best way I learn. So completely agree with that. And just one last question from Solomon Imamov. Some people are afraid to show their emotions because of group pressure or weaknesses. How do they cope with that?
Well, it's a matter of, as everything we learn to do, we start little by little. So it's a matter of confidence. You do it the first time. That's why with our methodology, we always start with a confidence. We call it Círculo de Expresión y Confianza, which is a circle of expression and confidence. And it's the first moment we get together in the classroom with adults and with students, exactly the same. And there is a moment to share. At the very beginning, there is fear, but little by little, session by session, week by week, they are open. Why? Because there is not judgment. You can feel, you can open yourself, you can tell the other how you are feeling if the other one is going to validate you. And this is one of the things we really work with our methodology, and I really suggest as a way to work in a classroom, even if you don't work with Cell or with In Their Shoes, it's to validate the emotions of your students. And once they feel they are being validated, they will go further in expression.
Thank you so much, Pax and Priyanka and everyone for submitting your questions. I'll pass back to you, Crystal.
Thanks so much. So now we are going to imagine if, and I'm going to invite Priyanka and Pax to both share your imagine if statement. Ours from HundrED is imagine if every child in the world was able to flourish in life, no matter what happens. Pax, what is yours?
Well, as I told you, I cannot say this imagine without taking in consideration the moment we are right now passing through. And I will say, imagine if all kinds of punishment would be replaced by compassion.
Wonderful. Thank you. Priyanka.
I just love that. And it's, I kind of want, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to say it again at the end, because I really think we should end with that thought and exactly what you said, keeping in mind the global context. Mine is imagine if every child was able to learn through mindful play. And then that play is what is culturally relevant and sustainable, and it's what helps every children play, learn, and thrive. And I think that's it.
Wonderful. Well, I'd like to at the end sort of invite you all, and I love that, Priyanka, we should definitely end again with what Pax said, but before we do that, we have been thinking at HundrED about what governments and policymakers can do to create enabling environments to give students the tools that they need to flourish in life, no matter what happens. So we'd like to invite you to join us on March 31st for our online event, Implemented, which is our first ever policy-focused event, which is organized in support of the LEGO Foundation. And there we're going to bring together innovators like Pax and Priyanka with policymakers from around the world to share how they have implemented social and emotional learning programs at scale. And we'll also be unveiling a new report that will break down how integrating social and emotional skills into the curricula can also help support education in crisis and teacher professional development and student well-being. So we'd invite you to register for Implemented, and we'll put the link here in the chat. And at the end, just sort of thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you, Kate, for the invitation to have this conversation. Thank you, Pax and Priyanka, for sharing your insights and inspiring us all to imagine if, and I'll pass it back to you, Pax, for your imagine if again.
Well, thank you very much for saying this. I will take all the imagines of all of us inside this imagine.
Hai să vedem dacă vă ajut cu ceva pentru astăzi.
There is So sorry, I was talking alone while I was saying, thank you very much. And I was saying that in this imagine, we take all the imagine if Priyanka said, the imagine Crystal said, all the imagines that all of us here, we have in mind is, and I'll say this one is, imagine if all kinds of punishment would be replaced by compassion. And thank you so much for everything.
Thank you all.
Thank you.